What's up, Josh here. So over the past week, I have had the incredibly tough and almost impossible decision at my hands: iPhone 17 Pro or iPhone Air. I'm happy to say I finally reached a conclusion, but before I tell you guys, I wanna go through all of my reasons as to why I picked the phone that I did, as well as hopefully help you guys make up your mind. Big thank you to Taurus for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get into it. So first, let's go over the top 3 pros of the iPhone Air, and coincidentally, they all start with the letter D. The first pro of the iPhone Air is design. The first time I held iPhone Air, that's when I was convinced. I was convinced that this was the phone that I was gonna get because it just felt so good in the hand because of how balanced it is in your hand, because of how the edges don't dig into your hands, because of how light it is. Like, look at how I'm handling this phone. It really took a lot of thought and engineering to make a phone that felt this good in the hand. I think all of the little decisions that Apple made, like keeping the edge flats, gives it that minimalistic, futuristic look, but also rounding out this transition so that you can barely feel the difference. The soft edges on the camera bar, the polished titanium, which I think actually gives it a more premium look than the iPhone 17 Pro. There's just something different and new with this phone that you don't get with the Pro phones, and that I find to be really, really exciting. Now, the question is, does the honeymoon period wear off? And the answer to that question is, yeah, it kind of does. So now I'm about a week into using this phone, and the honeymoon period has kind of worn off. It's sort of the same thing I would compare to if you gave someone a 120 hertz screen. They might notice a difference right off the bats, but then after a week, they would just perceive that as normal. But it's not until you put them back on a 60 hertz display that they're like, oh, this is really, really like bad and jittery. I think that's the same thing with this phone, is you sort of get used to like the thinness of this phone, but then it's not when you go back to a Pro phone that you're like, oh, I'm really thankful that I have this. But yeah, that right there is the first D, which is design. And it really does make this the perfect like scroller phone, you know? The second D is durability. This was way out of left field. I did not see this coming, but just from using it every day, I actually think that this phone is even more durable than the 17 Pro, which is a wild statement. From what I've seen online, there are tons of videos testing the durability of the iPhone Air, bend tests, drop tests, scratch tests. When I use this phone, I am actually more confident in its durability naked than my 17 Pro, which is saying a lot. Now, obviously the Air has titanium on the sides, which is not as malleable as aluminum, right? So when you drop it on its edge, it's not gonna dent. It might have a scratch, but I think a scratch is better than deforming the actual structure of the phone, which I've seen a lot happening with the Pro. Another thing with the Pro, and also the reason why I think you should get the silver color if you're getting the Pro, is on the blue and orange iPhones, if it gets scratched, the true aluminum color, which is silver, will get revealed underneath. And so I think silver, you know, if this phone gets scratched, it won't be as noticeable. The third big D is display. I certainly did not see this coming at all. This came out of right field. This display is slightly bigger than the regular 17 models, right? The 17 and the 17 Pro. If you're going with the Max, the display is even bigger than this one. Now, the 0.2-inch difference might not seem like much, but it is. And this reason, combined with the first reason, are maybe the most compelling for this phone for me. Because when you combine a thin and lightweight design with a larger display, suddenly you're kind of getting the big screen experience without having a big phone. For years, I've always admired people who had hands big enough to sort of one hand the Pro Max, or at least like be okay living with it. I wasn't one of those people. I always felt that the Pro Max iPhones were just too big for me. Not to mention the Pro Max models were the heaviest iPhones. And so when I first pulled up a YouTube video and, you know, just started using this phone in my day-to-day life, and then went back to my iPhone 17 Pro, I was shocked at how big of a difference the 0.2-inch display difference really makes. It is like way more enjoyable to watch videos on this phone, even with one speaker, than the 17 Pro. You feel comfortable one-handing this phone, and you don't feel like it's gonna slip out of your hands. You don't feel like you are handling a big phone at all, but still, you're kind of getting the benefits of an actually bigger phone. So those are the 3 big Ds that I wrote down for the iPhone Air. At this point, I was fully ready to go and commit with the Air, but not so fast because there are some downsides. But before we get into the downsides, I wanna quickly talk about today's sponsor, Taurus. This is the Taurus Flexline charger. It's a 67 watt retractable wall plug that makes traveling so much easier. There's a built-in cable that literally pulls out of the body, so you don't need to carry extra cords or adapters. And when you're done, it retracts back in. The foldable plug means it easily slips in my bag, and it can actually power 2 devices at once with the extra USB-C port. So I can charge both my phone and iPad together when I'm on the go. Its low temperature fast charging can power an iPhone up to 65% in just 30 minutes. If you want something pocket-sized, their Minimag power bank is a nice add-on. It's got 5,000 milliamp hours of power, snaps on magnetically, and gives you that extra top up without carrying a bulky battery bank. If you want to check these out, I'll have a link down in the description. Now, starting with the first and probably most concerning downside or trade-off that you're getting with the Air is the one camera. Now, I have good news and I have bad news. So the good news is that even though it has one camera, it is a very good camera. It's probably gonna outperform the iPhone camera that you have right now. Both the Air and the Pro are gonna get that new selfie camera, so I'm not gonna touch too much on that. Now, it's worth noting that the main camera on the 17 Pro is slightly wider and does slightly better in low lights because of the bigger sensor. But honestly, I really didn't notice that much of a difference between these 2 main cameras. So that's the good news. But the bad news is, of course, you're missing 2 cameras. You're missing the ultra wide and you're missing the telephoto. I think this really depends on the type of person that you are. For me, I really didn't mind it too much. I think this is like a medium concern for me. It wasn't to the point that it was a deal breaker for me. I know for some people, it's gonna be a deal breaker. Maybe you have kids and you wanna take nice pictures with the kids, some ultra wides, and zoom in on them when they're playing. That's, I understand. But for me, I think one camera is enough. In photography, you often hear the phrase zoom with your feet, and that's just to encourage, like, if you only start out with one prime lens, that you should just get closer or get further from the subject. But then I think a bigger deal for me is the fact that the iPhone Air actually doesn't do ProRes recording. You may have seen my day in the life with iPhone Air video. If you haven't, you should definitely watch it after this video. But in that video, I shot quite a bit with my FX3, my $4,000 cinema camera, and I shot quite a bit with my iPhone Air. But what I didn't expect is that the iPhone 17 Pro footage shot with Apple Log 2 was arguably higher quality in some situations and scenarios with certain lenses and apertures and lighting situations than my $4,000 FX3. And I was shocked at just the fact that you can have this thing in your pocket and pull out an app, tap one button, and get just the same results as a $4,000 cinema camera, which you have to set the ISO, the aperture, shutter speed, ND filters if you're filming outside. There's so much to consider and just get right when you're using that camera versus with the iPhone, you just tap a button. There are some shots, even with the telephoto camera on this lens, that I was blown away with while editing and color grading. I couldn't believe my eyes. So that is definitely a huge consideration when choosing between these phones, at least for me. But then the second downside of this phone is battery life. I have seen that in my day-to-day usage, I've hovered around 75, 80% battery used over the entire day. And when you're trying to preserve the battery on this phone, and what I mean by preserve is prevent battery degradation, you might want to consider charging this phone to like 80 or even 90%. You can actually set the charge limit just like you can in an electric car. And at that point, you kind of are cutting it close with like an all-day battery life. Now, the thing is, you probably will be near a power source most days. If you're a casual user, if you just work in an office or work from home, like, it's not gonna be a huge deal, but you may need to carry around a battery bank or some sort of portable charger. And for me, that slight battery anxiety does kind of defeat the purpose of the Air. I don't wanna be carrying around more things than I need. I just kind of want to use the phone as is. Whereas the difference with the iPhone 17 Pro is massive. I think Apple really maximized the amount of battery that they were able to put in the Pro phones this year with how thick they are. And that really translates with the iPhone 17 Pro. It still had about 30 to 40% at the end of the day, which I have never experienced with any iPhone ever before. There are two benefits to that. So the first benefit is obviously you don't have battery anxiety, but the second benefit is your battery will stay healthy longer because you're not charging it and cycling it as much. So it'll actually degrade even slower. And the fact that you can probably get away with limiting your charging to 80 or 90% on the 17 Pro, whereas with the Air, it's gonna be a lot harder to do that. Now, the final con to the iPhone Air is gonna be the fact that it only has one speaker. This honestly, for me, is a very, very, very small thing because I was actually impressed with how it sounded. Like at first I wasn't impressed. At first when I was comparing it back to back, but then as I settled into using the phone and started watching YouTube videos on it, it was a little bit weird at first because the sound was only coming out of the left side and it just felt like, you know, less bass, less immersion. But then the more I used it, the more I got used to it. And for me, the bigger screen actually made more of an impact than just having one speaker. Honestly, it doesn't sound tinny at all. It doesn't sound low quality. It just, if you're comparing it back to back with a 17 Pro, you are gonna notice a difference. Now, speaker quality is one thing, like the fact that it doesn't get as bassy and maybe not as immersive. That's one thing, but speaker loudness is another thing. So another problem with the iPhone Air is that the speakers don't get as loud as the 17 Pro. Now, I'm not the type of person to listen to music on my phone just with the phone speakers. But the one thing I do sometimes is I will take a phone call on speaker or a FaceTime call. And I do find that like when I put the person on speaker, it's not as good of an experience, right? The bass is missing. And so some of the natural characteristics of that person's voice tones are lost. Also, it doesn't get as loud. So if you're doing something in the background, it's harder to hear it. So you might as well just put it up to your ear. Yeah, those are minor concerns, not really a huge deal. So with all of those things taken into consideration, which phone did I pick? Well, it's gonna be the Air. Did you see it coming? Because I certainly didn't. What it really came down to is the fact that yes, the Pro is a fantastic tool for filmmaking and productivity with the long battery life of the cameras, but it doesn't provide joy or excitement. And even though with the iPhone Air, that excitement might wear off, I wanna see where this journey takes me. I wanna see how the battery life holds up. What about durability? How is it gonna fare over the next 30 days? So make sure to get subscribed for my 30-day review on the iPhone Air. Now, as far as the iPhone 17 Pro goes, I'm actually not gonna be returning this phone. I'm gonna keep it just in case I, for whatever reason, don't end up liking the Air. I may switch back to this phone. I'm also just gonna keep this phone as an inconspicuous secondary camera. So I'm gonna have my SIM in my iPhone Air, but I may, on some days, carry my 17 Pro just as a B camera. Let me know down below, are you Team Air or are you Team Pro? Why did you pick the phone that you did and what has been your experiences using either of these phones? Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Check out one of these videos, the iPhone Air Day in the Life. That one is a great video. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.